Jay, welcome. It's so good to see you. How are you doing?
It's good to see you. And is that the sign that made its way from the South Carolina event, the Charleston event?
It is. I have this, and the patio set is in my backyard, and the rug is on in my living room. So I just kind of took some of the things I bought for it and scattered them around my house.
I think that's a test of like, are you one of the OG? You've been there, you recognize the things around your house, you know?
Totally. Well, it was so fun to have you there, and I haven't seen you since. So this is a great treat for me to get to chat with you. And I know people are really excited for this conversation. So do you want to just start by sharing a little bit about yourself? Like a little, yeah.
Sure. So I'm Dr. J. I am the founder of Child-Free Wealth. We use the word child-free not necessarily to be just the terms. This is when Katie tried to help me on like, how do we pick terms that work? We do child-free, permanently childless. It gets confusing when we put those all in one title. But I'm also the author of the new book coming out, The Child-Free Guide to Life and Money, which as far as we know is the only book that exists on like, how does being child-free or permanently childless change our life and finances? So I'm pretty excited. That comes out December 31st, and like everything is in super book release mode. And of course, my calendar is a bit of a nightmare, but always want to hang out with Katie. So
Well, I'm excited for your book too, and I will find the link to that and put it in the chat for people to pre-order if they're interested. But you shared a little bit about yourself, but there aren't very many financial planners, like you said, who specialize in working with people who are permanently without kids. So, how did you get into this line of work? Like, what made you decide to choose this as a specialty?
well, it really started with this question of about me and my wife. So we use the term child free, but really it was not by choice. My wife had a 50-50 chance of dying if she got pregnant. So like, whether that was by choice or not, we have debate on that. But when I was studying to become a certified financial planner, the thing I found was there was never once a mention any of the education about living a life without kids. Everything assumes your financial plan, your life plan is either pre-kids or post-kids, and there was nothing else. So I started on this research question, which really was, how weird are we? Now, my wife and I, we are a little weird because, we're two PhDs. We'll sit around at night, like researching studies. Like, no, we literally did. Like, we just exchanged a study back and forth, and we're having discussion about it a few minutes ago. So we are weird, but how weird are we for being child free or permanently childless and living a different life? Come to
Yeah.
find out, it's about 25% of the US. So we're not really that weird, in the group, but we are weird in the general population. So that's where I really started researching. Okay, then how do we do finances differently? How do you live your life differently? How do you make an impact? What does that mean to you and all those fun things? And that's been my research since. And it's been interesting. Let's be real. We're in a political world right now, and that's been really interesting. Some interesting challenges with getting the book out and the word, using the words and all that. But it's been great because I get to talk to people that live lives like us and go, okay, how is that different? And make sure they get advice that matches them versus everybody else.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's so cool that you're doing this because, I've had the opportunity to work with you a little bit here and there over the last couple of years and have learned so much from you and, have been able to see how some of the advice or like information that you have does look different than what I get when I'm, you know, watching Dave Ramsey or whatever and trying to get tips from other places. And it's so helpful because you always talk about that our lives are always following the I would say typical life path and like those mile markers. And so in some ways that can give us more flexibility and freedoms too. So that's kind of nice. But could you give us some examples of like what are some of the main ways that you see financial planning looks different for someone without kids versus if you're planning as a parent?
Yeah. So when you're playing without kids, it's almost you get a little bit too much freedom. Like it's kind of like if I can do anything, what do I do? And that's a challenge for people because the Sam Life script, the nice thing about it is it tells you what to do next. I get married, I go to school, get married, have kids, like it's just things I do. But when you leave that, it's like, all right, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want my impact to be? How do I want to live it? For example, most of my clients don't have a priority on how much money they pass on to the next generation. Whether it's a die with zero approach or whatever terms you want to use, but that's not a priority. Well, for parents, that's kind of a default. I'm going to give my money to my kids. Well, what do you want to do? Do you want to give it to, like we are giving to our nephews? Do you want to give to charity? How do you want to make an impact? That changes it. I also find that a lot of people without kids don't really want to retire in the standard answer. They're kind of like, I want to do something I enjoy for my life. I
Mhm.
want to follow my passions. We have a term we call financial planners to live early. How do I live my best life now rather than just saving up for 25 years for retirement? And then, of course, we get to the other ones, which are guaranteed kind of gotcha questions like, well, who's going to take care of you when you're older? And what's your plan for long term care? And uh, there's all these assumptions that happen. And some of those, I have a kind of a love hate thing with that question. But the reality check is everybody needs to have a plan for that. We just know we need to. And then we
Yeah.
get to the hard questions. One of the ones I've been working on for 3 years is who makes decisions for us when we don't have next of kin?
Yeah.
Who's that power of attorney? Like we've got a new product coming out next year, hopefully to solve that. But like really hard questions that the system is just not meant to handle.
Yeah. And I think those are some of the more serious kind of, thoughtful questions that you really got to put some time into and figure out how to make a plan that can account for that. Um, but some of the stuff that I like about working with you too is that first thing that you mentioned, which is like if you don't have to try to have huge piles of money when you die. Sounds a little bit morbid talking about this, but it does give you that flexibility of like, okay, how much do I need to actually like take care of myself? And then if I do have extra, like one of the things I love most about like hearing your kind of philosophy around this is that idea of would I rather, let's say I have, I don't know, making up numbers here, 5 grand that I could give to my like separate out between my nieces and nephews when I die. That'd be cool. It'd be a lot cooler if I spent that money maybe like going on a little road trip with them or doing something like, that's not gonna go super far with 8 nieces and nephews, but you get what I'm saying. Like that idea of like, would I rather have the experiences now and donate to the causes that I like now and getting to see the impact that that money may have? Or I don't know, it was such a shift for me because that kind of, I don't know, default narrative is always like, I feel like die with as much money as you can with the intention that you need to have a lot of wealth to pass on, right?
Yeah, and the way we say it for my wife and I is our nephews get what's left over. Okay, so they're our default answer. They get what's left over. There's a lot of charitable things you want to do, but really, if you're going to give to charity, you want to do it during your life because you get tax breaks during your life. You don't get tax breaks when you die.
Oh, true.
But
Yeah.
our nephews get, if they get like a 10 grand or 100 grand, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
If they get $1 million, I made a mistake. And the reason is I can improve their life better now. So if we're in our 90s when we die, and they're going to be in their 60s, the odds that they need that money now then is very, very low.
Mhm.
Versus, I just had this conversation with one of my nephews. I said, "Look, we've been putting aside for college for you. We put a certain amount each week." And I gave him some tips on how to get through college without student loans and how to test out. And I said, "Look, for every one of these tests you pass, I'm going to give you X amount of money." And he's going, "Are you kidding me?" I'm like, "No, like I'm going to encourage you to do these things so you can do that." And education is important to us. We're both PhDs, but for others, it's like what matters. So I have a
Yeah.
client, my favorite. Her account is called the Get the Babies to Love Me account, and it's for the nieces and nephews, and it's specifically not for education. It's specifically for the once in a lifetime experience.
Mhm.
The backpacking across Europe, maybe putting some money into their business, buying their first car, something. And that's how you can truly change somebody's life. Because let's be real, $5,000 to somebody who's 18 is life changing.
Yeah.
$5,000 to somebody who's 60 is going to go in the bank and sit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember, my grandma set up like a little fund where when I started college, I had like $500 a semester that I could put towards classes, and I was a what do they call it, non-conventional student,
Mhm.
non-traditional student, because I didn't start college till I was almost 30. So I was working full time, but at like a pretty much minimum wage job, and then taking classes, night classes in the evening, and paying out of pocket. And that made a huge difference. So, yeah, and maybe it's not about kids either, right? Like you talk about causes you care about. It could be just something fun that you want to do. So, anyway, I love that shift. We won't go too far down that, but it's one of the very fun ideas that you gave me that I spend a lot of time thinking about now.
I think the
Um,
bottom line is your money needs to go to what you value.
yeah,
And I don't care what that is. Like, I don't get to judge your values. Like, that's not my job as a planner. What my job is, though, is to help you identify what do you care about and then make sure your money's going that direction.
hmm,
So we have the Child Wealth podcast, and one of our top downloaded episodes is I'll make you quit your job. I make lots of people quit their job. And the reason is because they're freaking miserable. Like,
yeah,
are you just going to keep doing this for another 20 years and be miserable? No,
hmm,
let's go back and be a librarian. Let's start our own business. Let's do whatever we want and passion. And they go, well, that's going to mess up my retirement. I'm going to go, well, if retirement's not your goal, who cares?
yeah,
You can take a pay cut and do something you enjoy. And like when I have these conversations, people they're like, nobody's ever told me I can do that. And I'm like, first of all, it's your money. You can do whatever you want with it. But like, you just told me what you value. And what's
mhm,
happening is your money's not going to what you value. And that's
yeah,
the problem. If your money's following that standard life script, it's going to a different set of values than what you have.
right. Yeah, I mean, totally makes sense. So you have your first book that came out a few years ago that is portraits of different people that you talk to just kind of give some snapshots of like what are people's lives without kids looking like. And now you've got your second book coming out at the end of this month. And tell us a little bit about like who did you write it for, and what do you hope that people will get from reading it?
Yeah. So I actually got lucky. I did the first book, a self-published, and then a publisher reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you have a second book?" And if you ask an author, do they have a second book? The answer is always yes. I mean, I've got five on my list. But really, I was trying to get to, okay, what of those standard rules change, and how do we make sure it gets there? And it's interesting. The book, the first half, it's all about figuring out what life you want to live. The second half is okay, then, but how about your finances? Which is backwards from the way people do it. People are like, oh, I can retire when I hit this number. Well, maybe that's not your goal. Maybe that's not what you care about. We talk a lot in the book about what happens if you're living a life as a soloist. You're single with no kids. What happens if you're in a couple or group or other, structures? How do we make sure you get that life? And I think the challenge is if you go online and look for financial advice, just about all of it assumes you have kids or want to have kids.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't fit. So, like, how do we get advice to people that are living a different life? I'd love to work with them one on one as a planner, but we charge a lot of money for that. Like, but a book for $19, anybody can get access to. It also
Yeah.
gets access to our courses and all that and Q&As. But we're doing that so everybody can have advice that reflects them and the life they're living, not this generic, you know, plan that everybody else has to live.
Yeah, and I had a chance to, you sent me an advanced copy of the book, so I was able to look through it and read it and see how I could use it in my own life. And some of the concepts were familiar to me because we've done some work in the past, but some of them were new or like good reminders. So I was able to like make some changes based on that, and it's just nice to have around. I feel like it's something I could revisit every year and kind of do check-ins because I'm kind of newer on the financial planning path. So what is useful to me now is going to look different in a year from now, hopefully, if I put some foundational things and then can build on it. But yeah, so I did put the link if anyone on the call is interested in pre-ordering, and you are doing, the link also includes this information about the giveaway that you're doing. So if you pre-order and send proof of purchase, then you're gonna do like a drawing to do a free session with someone, right?
Yep. So free session with me. And we're going to be doing special Q&As just for the people that do pre-orders to get a whole bunch of that stuff. And I'm going to throw a link in the chat as soon as I find it. We've actually got a giveaway on Goodreads. We're giving away 20 copies of the book. So you can make sure through the 5th, but I will find that and put that into the chat.
Okay. Well, yes, find that because I don't have a link for that, but I did put the other link to pre-order. But yeah, that's very cool. Um, okay, so we spent quite a bit of time together, like I said, the past few years. And like one of the things that I love most about working with you and getting to know you is that it's clear just like how deeply you do care about the people that you work with and genuinely want to see them thrive, like not just financially, but also in pursuing a life that brings them joy. And I think you're able to do that in a way that like doesn't come with judgment, because I know like one of the things that I would be hesitant about with meeting with financial planner is like, well, have you done this, and this? And I haven't done any of it. Like I said, I worked minimum wage jobs most of my life and just got into more of like career jobs a little bit later in life and just feel pretty behind on stuff. So it's scary to meet with someone and then I feel like it's gonna be like a reminder of what I'm not doing. But I just have always appreciated the way that you approach working with clients and your care for them and like really wanting to see them embracing joy in like a life that does that uh, is one of the reasons I love working with you. So, what do you love the most about getting to be a part of people's journey, like in this way?
So the way we say is we're trying to simplify your finances so your life can be amazing. What an amazing life looks like to people is completely different no matter who I'm talking to. Like I get some really cool ideas. I have somebody who her goal is really to make the best garden in the area that everybody around gets value from and can like embrace and be part of and like really, really passionate about gardening and how that impacts the people around them. I don't know stuff about gardening. I'm just being frank. Like I don't. So I get to see, okay, that is an amazing life for you. How do we do that? How do we get your values to match that? And how do we get you in that path? And I've yet to run out of like new things to see for amazing, but I get to kind of like steal ideas from each person. Like, oh, well, this is something that somebody did. Like right now, we're having a lot of discussions and in transparency that is related to politics around people wanting to move either to other states or other countries. I've spent the last month working with people. How do we do that? And like I'm getting the other day, I was like, somebody's like, I want to move to Costa Rica. I'm like, I don't know what the rules in Costa Rica are. Let's figure this out. What do we have to pay to do it? Like, it's like you get to do this. And part of what I look at it as, especially in the political world we're in right now, the judgment on those people who don't have kids is palpable. Okay. So
Yeah.
my book right now, they just passed a law in Russia that would be illegal to publish anything about being child free or embracing not having kids. That's what I'm facing day to day and probably what drives me batty. But it's also like I know if I can give this group a voice, kind of like what you do, Katie, like if you give a group a voice, they can all rally behind you. You can all, you can support the people that don't have a voice
Yeah.
and do that. I get it. And I acknowledge I'm a straight white male. I'm not the target of a lot of this stuff. But that means I can go out and I said to my staff, I'm like, literally, I'm going to go out and take the bullets for you because I can do that while other people are worried about their safety.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, okay, the haters on social media. I just stopped reading all that. But like, there's always those. But I can go out and do this. So I do a lot of press. I do a lot of other things just to talk about. It's okay to live a different lifestyle. It's
Right.
not better. It's not worse. It's just different, and it's okay to be yourself. And when we talk to our clients, about a third of the initial meetings end up in tears, and I couldn't figure out why. And the reason is they told us that's the first time they felt heard and seen. Like
Mhm.
that is so powerful. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so how do we do that for the 50 million people, child free or childless people in the US? Like that's the challenge. But
Right.
how do we make sure they're getting good advice, make sure they're being embraced? And that's what I wake up every morning trying to figure out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it really is so important. And I think that the way child is not by choice people are perceived, and maybe it's like a little bit different because maybe we get met with a little bit more pity, but there's still some of that like disdain there too
Yep.
sometimes. And you saw that definitely with the JD Vance comments. It just blew everything up, and other stuff that's been coming down on us. Just the rhetoric, um, but I think that you being child free and talking about it from a child free perspective, you get it even worse. I think because there's a different level of like just animosity that comes from people who have chosen not to have kids. I know in your case specifically, it wasn't quite that simple, but gosh, like I guess what I'm saying, because we could really go down a rabbit hole with this, but it is nice to have a place where you could show up and you're with your people and they're going to get it, and you're not going to have to deal with that, right? So I
Yeah,
think, yeah.
you're on the right page. I think, we can't talk about this world without talking about the childless cat lady comments and all that at this point. But what was really interesting is JD Vance's wife came out to quote unquote fix the discussion. And her answer was, hey, he's not talking about people who can't have kids. He's just talking about the crazy ones who choose not to. And I'm like, how did you fix the discussion with that comment? Like, you just,
I saw that.
I'm like, did you really just say that out loud? Like,
It's
and
ridiculous.
my thing is, so I spent half my time talking to financial people about child free and childless folks. And I was at a conference, the Financial Therapy Association, probably the most inclusive conference I've ever been to in finance. These are the people that give you hugs. And they asked, is it okay to ask somebody if they're child free or childless? And I said to them, I said, well, do you ask them if they're LGBTQ plus? And they go, no, I would never do that. We let them self-identify. I'm like, so like we can do the same thing. So we started talking a bit more, and they're trying to like puzzle through how do I work with this group. And so finally I turned to him, I said, listen, if somebody self-identifies as gay, have you ever asked them why? And they're like, no, I would never do that. I'm like, same thing. Let us self-identify. Let me be child free. Child. Don't ask me questions about why am I doing this, getting into my personal stuff. Like people ask me, and then I'm like, yeah, my wife could die. And they're like, oh, I don't want to ask you the question anymore. I'm like, no, you don't want to ask the questions, but you can embrace the group and embrace them for what they are. Let them share what they want to share, and hit, kind of get them where they're at. And I think that's hard. Is like even just the language around it, we're still struggling. Katie, I'm still waiting for
Yeah.
you to finish the answer. You had said you were going to convince somebody to figure out a term that we can all use for not having kids, and you were going to talk to a linguist on this. Like I don't remember, this
I
was like
know.
2 years ago. You had that idea.
It's still on my list. Because it is, I don't know, it is on my list, but I haven't done it. I don't know. Like I just feel like we don't have enough terminology to cover all the circumstances that lead to someone not having kids, because we don't all fit into childless, child free. And I don't know anyone who is childless who likes that term. Literally not a single person. I don't like I In my personal life, I don't go around saying, "Oh yeah, I'm childless." Like I just say, "Yeah, I don't have kids. I wasn't able to, whatever." But like the actual term, I use it for community building because it's a way for me to find my people and bring them together. And it's the best thing to describe what's bringing us together. But yeah, it's I think Ruby Warrington uses like some kind of scientific word that means that you don't have kids, but it sounds very clinical. I can't remember what it is. I'll have to look it up. But yeah, that I know she uses that because it's kind of like an all-inclusive term, just meaning like you don't have kids. But yeah, it's kind of tricky. Um, okay, so we had a question come in the chat, and I feel like I kind of know what you might say about this, but I'll let you say it. But someone asked, so Dr. J just alluded to this, but how do financial strategies change depending on where someone lives, especially for folks outside the US?
Yep. So first of all, I can only help clients that are in the U.S., but the bonus of doing the book is I can give generic advice that therefore can be used in other countries. Um, I think one of the hardest things for other countries is figuring out what the answer is around this power of attorney question of like who makes decisions for you. So they're just having a big discussion in the UK about this, like literally like this week on who makes decisions for who and who decides who can. They're really talking about euthanasia and like who decides, and like there's no great answer on that. So like
Yeah.
those are really the hard ones that change area by area. The things about like saving for retirement, all that, none of that really doesn't change. What changes is the tax laws, the legal stuff, that type of
Yeah.
thing. What gets interesting is, are there things built into the system that either help or hurt you? So, for example, in the U.S., we get the child tax credit, but if you don't have kids, you don't get the credit. So does that help or hurt you? There's some digs around that. So that depends on your area. I think the other thing that I'm finding is there's a lot of folks that are moving outside the U.S. for political reasons and other things. And it's like, okay, how do I keep like one foot in one country, one in another? What happens if I'm traveling all the time? It makes a lot of complexity that I'm going to be frank. If you're going to be in more than one country in like a year or 2 years in residency, you need a professional. It's like there's do not go it alone, and you need somebody for that area. I have a colleague who's starting up a firm. He's been working on it for a while in the UK, serving child-free folks. There was somebody that reached out to me from Australia. Hopefully they start it. Like there's a couple other folks trying to get there. But right now, unfortunately, there's not a lot of specific to different countries.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you. And somebody did put in the chat that she thinks Ruby Warrington uses a reproductive. She said, which looks as weird as it sounds. And then the word I was thinking of, and maybe it's not her that uses it, might be someone else, is nulliparous.
Yep.
But that actually, it looks like is just for women specifically who haven't given birth. So, yeah, we definitely need some more terms. I don't love it. And I don't love that, like, we don't even within our own communities, there's a lot of confusion, but then you get outside of that into like the media and people just throw around whatever word they want. And a lot of times it doesn't make sense. Or like, I just saw that article in the New York Times a couple weeks ago about how sad grandparents are that they don't, people who want to be grandparents who have children but not grandchildren and their grief. And I was very annoyed for multiple reasons by that article. But childless people were just completely left out of the conversation. It wasn't even mentioned. It was just about how people are grieving because their kids don't want to have kids. And yeah, it was frustrating. There were so many article drove me nuts. But I think that happens a lot where like you just see, especially in the media, like they'll just throw around whatever word and there's no definition and they're not giving like the full context or nuance to the discussion.
Well, and I do a lot of stuff with the press, and I spend a lot of time trying to educate them on the terms, different structures, how people get to this life. But very little that makes it to print. Like, it's like,
yeah,
like that's the stuff they don't care about. Like, and the way we look at it from a financial standpoint is your plan changes when kids will never be part of the picture. How you got there, what your journey was, that's up to you. Yeah. Like, and that's up to you if you want to share, if you don't, whatever that is, we're not judging. I don't get a vote in you having kids. You don't get a vote in me. Like, we're doing our thing. But interestingly enough, we're actually finding with this new book coming out that even some of the AI the algorithms are going against us. I went to advertise the book on Amazon, and they have a process you go through to get your ads approved. Twice the AI turned it down because of the word child free in it.
Really?
Yep.
I saw that that's a thing on Facebook.
Yep.
Too.
Yeah. So it's I'm like, I can't even use the word child free, childless. Like I can't use those because then the algorithms won't work with it. And I'm like, what? Like I just don't understand it at times.
Yeah, one thing I did read about this that made me feel a little bit better about it because it felt like at least maybe there were some good intentions behind this is that when I don't really run ads typically, but when I was hosting the summit, I wanted to try to get the word out a little bit broader than the networks that I usually have. And so I did look at seeing if I could, run some ads on Facebook. And because childless was seen as a group that could be like people could be like predatory towards it, because we get, if you're childless, you get a lot of fertility clinics, people wanting to sell you, like the whole fertility industry just jumps right on you. So in that regard, it was kind of nice that there was a little bit of a buffer of like, let's be cautious about advertising with that. But yeah, I think again, there's not the like nuance or um it's just kind of like a blocker of all of it, right? Like you can't mention any of the words at all,
Well,
even
and
child-free.
right now in the press, they want to talk about dinks versus sinks. Like that's the term they want to use this week because
Yeah,
it's
right.
trending on TikTok or whatever. I'm like, okay, then we have to have a discussion of dink versus dinky, no kids yet versus never. Like, where are you at in life? Is this a phase, quote unquote? They have those like, and I'm like, we are not having a good conversation. Like we're not talking about substantial stuff. We're talking about surface things, and I don't know. Maybe somebody in the audience has the great answer on how to get there. But one of the biggest challenge for us as a company is how do we get people to go, hey, there are people that serve people like me and find us.
Yeah. Mhm.
If you search child-free financial planning, we're like in 7 out of the top 10 responses, whether it's articles I'm in or the books, other things. Cool. But people don't know to search that. Like
Yeah.
our top search term right now this week was financial planning for childless, and that was this week. The week before was elderly care without kids. So,
Mhm.
okay, so like some of this is starting to percolate, but like, how do we get there?
I mean, I think with financial planning, it's because there you're not going to really turn up any search results for this, right? Like you're doing this. I don't know. Maybe there are other people who are specializing in this, and I just haven't heard of them. But like, it's probably partly because it's not really a thing yet, right? And I think that's part of it. It does kind of blow my mind that like it's 2024. Child-free and childless people have always existed, but it's just now within the last like few years that we actually have the tools with technology and the internet and all the things that we have now to find each other and have conversations and like create other forms of community and connection that we just haven't had the ability to do, even like 10 years ago. So I think a lot of these conversations are just new, and there's something also kind of fun about being people who can like try to create those communities and try to create those spaces and find each other and bring each other together. So I feel like we're not talking that much about finances because I'm getting off track here.
Well, and they can ask whatever questions, life, finances, estate planning, whatever. I'll try to help you. Throw those in the chat. And Katie and I'll keep having a conversation. Okay, you all need to understand that Katie and I've had hours and hours and hours and hours of conversation on this stuff. And
Yeah.
and like, I give Katie a lot of credit for, a lot of influence in what I'm doing. She's actually called out in the book. And I think you're on the right page that some of it feels new. But then you talk to people like Jody and you talk to people like Laura Carroll who've been doing it forever.
Yeah.
And like, they're like, yeah, we're just catching up to it. So
Yeah, that is absolutely true. But also like in the context of humanity, I don't think like I don't think people 100 years ago probably were able to find each other very easily because the stigma and taboo and all that would have been even worse. Um, but with tools now, definitely, there's people, child-free and childless people who have been, working to build community, talking about this stuff for, I don't know, maybe a decade or so, probably longer in some other circles and, pre-internet. Um, and yeah, definitely we're not the first, but I think in terms of, I don't know, just the fact that we child-free and childless people have always existed. Uh, it's just that we've got newer tools, I guess, to help find each other.
and by the way, we're still not in anywhere near the numbers of what, the number I use about 25% of the US are child free or permanently childless. So that's 50 to 60 million adults.
Yeah.
So that means we should have like, you and I should each have 1 million followers on, no, but I mean, if you look at, if I use the opposite example, if you look at mommy blogs, they have 7 to 10 million followers.
Yeah.
Like that's a standard number.
Mhm.
And part of it is that we have the conversation. So I had a great conversation. I had an interview with Sarah Zeff Geber, who did a book on solo aging and retirement. And she's been working on this for a decade. And she really talks about kind of how does it change when you're doing solo aging. It's a great topic. I'm married, so I don't know that I know it all. This is like a topic that I've been leaning into to understand. And I said to her, I said, okay, over 10 years, have you seen much change to support the group or like embrace it? And she's like, no. And I'm like, Sarah, that was not the answer I was looking for. She's like, because we were talking about also the laws around it, because there's some laws around your next of kin make a decision for you.
Yeah.
And she's like, nope. And I'm like, do you have faith that it's going to improve? Because we're especially talking about long-term care and the expense. And she's like, no. And like she's a very positive person, but she's like, she's been beating her head in the wall for a decade. I've been doing this for 3 years. I've not been working on it as long as some people, but she's been doing it for 10 years, and she's like, I don't know. There's something needs to shift. And unfortunately, right now, the shift is the wrong direction from a political standpoint.
I mean, if I were to put on my advocacy hat, because I used to be do community organizing for like political stuff, I would say that those connections and the relationship building, like that always has to come first. We have to be able to find each other. We have to be able to have conversations. We have to be able to, be in community together in order for us to then organize to advocate for change. It's really hard to do that unless you've got people organized and together that can communicate and like plan action together. And right now we don't have a lot of avenues for that.
Yeah. So okay, can I jump on Luna's question? Okay, Luna.
I was just looking at that.
So Luna asked the question that has been my nightmare for 3 years. And I'm not exaggerating. So the question really is, how do I make sure I find somebody I can trust to follow my wishes and make decisions for you? And no apologize for this, Luna. This is the one I've been trying to work on for the community. This is the one that keeps me up at night. And I think I have a solution coming out, and I'll explain in a second. But it keeps me up at night because...
Wait, I'm sorry, Jay. I don't want to interrupt, but will you read the whole question? Because for people watching this after, they won't be able to see it.
Yep. So the question is, what is the best way to find a trusted person to follow your wishes when it is just you, and have it airtight so no one can try to claim assets after you're dead and gone, but will also adhere to your wishes? Would this be part of a will or something else? Can you hire someone in this role if there is no family? Thank you. And sorry, I'm going on my tirade because this is my topic that literally this morning I woke up 4 a.m. thinking about it. And the first thing is, if you're listening to this talk at all, you must have estate paperwork done. That means your will, medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney in place, because the system is all based on next of kin. And they don't search too hard for next of kin. So if I'm traveling and I'm out in Charleston for the event and I got no family in the area, the government or healthcare organizations are going to make decisions for you. And if you don't have a will, the government can actually take your stuff, because they will, in theory, find your next of kin, which could be your parents, could be your siblings, could be others, but they don't search too hard because they get the money. I was working with one state, and literally they put an ad in the newspaper saying, does anyone know Katie? No? Okay, well then her stuff is all ours. That's
wild, because the government knows.
Well, but it's not in their interest.
Right.
To spend a lot of time. I try not to be jaded, but let's be real on it. So you have to have that paperwork in place. It turns out 58% of people in the U.S. do not have a will, power of attorney paperwork. Now, Katie, you and I had this discussion about 2 years ago. All right. So if you're listening to this, whatever, there's a website called freewill.com. Free. That's the key word. Costs you nothing to get this done. The bigger issue is, whose name do you put down on it? So this is the question of who's going to make the decisions for me? And I had a reporter reach out to me, and she was working on an article of how do soloists and people without kids do this long-term care stuff and make decisions for me and all that. And her answer was, can we, she went on a tirade because reporters go on their own thing. And I'm going to include a link, by the way, also that has like talks about what a will or power attorney and all that is, so you can get specific. But this reporter said to me, well, how about I do this? How about I give my nephew my estate in return for them making decisions for me? So I said, listen, there's a problem there. If I'm the nephew making decisions for you and I have to make decisions to put you in a home, I get to choose, do you go in the good home or the bad home? The cheap one. And if you look at the stats, AARP says elder abuse and neglect is just through the roof.
Yeah.
And you would hope your nephew would be like, oh, no, I'll put you in the good home. Well, no, what they're going to get in the estate is going down. And that becomes a conflict as we're going through it. And so even family becomes an issue. Now, if you are in California or Arizona, you can hire what's called a professional fiduciary. That is someone who can legally act as your executor, medical power attorney, financial power attorney. So you make a whole bunch of documents. This is what I want. They are a fiduciary, which means they, by law, have to do what you want. That works for 2 out of the 50 states. That's not really helpful. It's helpful for right. 2 states. And it only works when you're in that state. So like if I do my paperwork in California and then I'm traveling to Maine, they probably can't serve me because it's the state issues. So I've spent 3 years trying to figure out solutions. I talked to lots of attorneys. Attorneys are more than happy to do the financial part or the executor. They will not touch the medical part. And I understand why there's a liability with it, but like we need all 3. And we need people that are going to, your comment about airtight, they need to follow exactly what I say. I don't want them getting creative, I don't want, how do I do this? And I had somebody, he explained it this way. He was taking care of his mom. His mom's in a nursing home and she's 90 something. And her real love in life is she loves chips. Okay. She just loves chips. The nurses potato chips. Yeah. Just plain old chips, like chips.
Okay.
And she goes to the nurses and says, hey, I'd like some chips. And they go, no, well, that's too salty. It's going to mess your diet. He's like, give her the damn chips. Like she's 90 something. What's it going to do? And his question was, who's going to make sure I get my chips?
Yeah.
And that's the real question.
Yeah.
So I have a meeting next week. We've been working on this for about 18 months with banking regulators because unfortunately, most of this is run by what's called trust companies or banking regulators. And they've never done anything like this. So for 18 months, we've been working on it. And we hope by the middle of next year to be launching what we're calling the Child-Free Trust. And what that will do is we will be able, as a trust company, to act as your executor, medical power attorney, financial power attorney across the country. So my worry on this, my wife and I, if we get in a car crash, who makes our medical decisions? Who makes our financial decisions? And here's what my wife's going to worry most about. Who's going to let our dog out? You think I'm joking, but she's going to be in the hospital worried about who's letting Colt out.
Yeah.
And those are things your family would normally do for you. But 25% of the US don't have close family, or they're disenfranchised from their family, or other things, like big things. And that's where a professional can do that. Now, by the way, that doesn't really exist yet. This is something we're launching in 6 months-ish. We actually filed for a patent on it. So it's going to be the first patent that has the word child-free or childless in it. Which sounds silly, but those are the things that get you representation.
Yeah.
And we're working through all this because it's such a giant issue. And Luna, I'm sorry, I don't have and here's exactly how you do this. And this is nice and easy. No, it is probably the hardest decision for people without kids is who do I trust? Now, what a lot of people end up doing is they do kind of the Golden Girl setup. My friends, you cover me, I'll cover you. The downside is that's a lot of burden on people. Let's just be real on that. And the last friend to die is screwed. You 3 of you all agree, we're going to cover each other. The last person is out of luck.
Yeah.
And that's where I don't have a great answer. That's the best answer we got right now is your friends.
Yeah.
But it's still not a great answer.
Yeah, because if you're the last one, then you got to get some new recruits, and then you end up starting a cult or some kind of multi-level marketing pyramid
Did I
scheme.
hear Katie's starting a cult? Oh wait, no.
No, I mean, yeah. So it sounds like though you did put the link in the chat. It sounds like for what Luna or someone who's looking for something similar. That's kind of the best that we can do right now.
It
Is
is.
maybe get creative, use the tools that you have. But yeah, I read an article that was just like they just asked a bunch of attorneys who do wills, like, what's the weirdest things you've seen in there? And there were some pretty interesting snippets in there, but one of them was that someone had said that when they passed, they want to make sure their cat was taken care of. So I can't remember if it was like a relative or a friend or someone, but they said this person can live in the house as long as my cat is alive and they're taking care of my cat. And the attorney said that, like, basically implying that like the cat maybe died a lot of years ago and they got like a replacement that looks very much like that cat, maybe a few times, and have lived in the house for like 30 years or something.
So
um,
I've actually written those up with people. So I don't do the legal side, but like talk through the decision making. There's one I love here. It's called a senior catio. And this house is owned by the cats that live there. So
mhm.
you say, hey, they're going to take care of my cat. You give them, I think it's $25,000. Your cat can live there for life. They have helpers that come in and feed them and clean them and hang out with them and socialize. But the cats legally own the house.
Yeah.
And I love it. And the thing is, people are like, if you don't have a will, who's going to take your cat? It's a big issue. I mean, our cat's a jerk.
Yeah.
Okay. Like people don't want him. Like, I got to give him money to take him. Like,
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, that's still helpful because we've got the links in there. It gives you a place to start, and I know your book really does function as a guide, so it's got a lot of different topics. Definitely covers some of this stuff. So, definitely recommend checking out the book, and it really does walk you through a lot of the big different financial decisions that you might have to make now and to plan for your future, and kind of gives you like step by step, like here's the things you need to be thinking about. So at least to get started on some of these topics, very, very helpful. Does anyone else have questions? If so, feel free to unmute and ask it, or if you want to just put it in the chat. We've still got about 10 minutes left, so we've got time for a couple more questions. I know one, Jay, that came up beforehand in the Childless Collective online community under the event there. Someone wanted me to ask about um, what if you just have kind of a precarious financial situation, like you're not making a lot of money, it's hard to save, it's just this stuff's really challenging. What kind of advice do you have? Where do you get started if you're not your retirement's already covered and now you got fun money? If you are in the opposite side of that, where do you start with that?
it's funny. You mentioned Dave Ramsey to start, and I got to pick on him because I'm just down the road here in Tennessee. And he's got his 7 baby steps. We have what we call the 8 no baby steps. We're just having a little fun with the term. But the reality check is the first step is to get a budget and get a debt, which sounds really easy, but it's super hard. Okay, like this is the hardest step. And we have a podcast episode, we call it Forced Adulting. It's the things you don't want to do, but you need to do. Like it is these things. And unfortunately, there's this belief that if you don't have kids, like you just magically have money. And it's not true. Income disparities are real and it's a big deal. And the hard part is you might not be able to make it on what you're making for money. And part of that is where you are. So, for example, I had somebody really struggling. Um, they were living in LA and their rent on their apartment was $5,000 a month. I'm like, uh, you make 70 grand a year, which is it's actually average for a US salary. Like, that's good. But your rent is 5 grand a month of that. Like, that is your entire, like, you cannot make, I can't math this. Like, there's no way to do that. And that's where it's like, okay, well, can I move? Can I find different jobs? Can I do different things? And that's where I end up having to talk to people like, okay, how do we reskill? So, for example, there are a lot of programs. usually offered by the workforce development area, that will train you for a new job that's in demand. There's also a website called Make Me Move, I think it is. And they talk about towns that are willing to pay you to move to there. Like, that's awesome. Let me go find an online job and live in this town that's going to pay me to be there.
Mhm.
I had somebody else who, didn't have a lot of money, but like their job got eliminated and, it was kind of rough situation, but they had some money. We did the math. They're going to go live in a island out in the middle of the Pacific in Tuvalu, which is, I don't know where it is. It's like an island out in the middle of nowhere. Tuvalu's actually big thing is they're known for the domain name .tv, and that's how they make all their money for the country. It's .tv. But the cost of living, everything, housing, food, healthcare, was 25 grand a year. Like complete. I mean, we go from somebody spending 5 grand a month on housing to 25 grand, and like people are like, well, can we do that in the US? Depends.
Yeah.
So I lived in Mississippi. The cost of living is a lot less there, but then you got to live in Mississippi. And there's good, bad, and ugly there. So you have to make some structural changes. The hard part is you can be drowning so much that you're like, I just can't get my head above water. And the only answer is get a handle on your finances, get a budget, start paying down your debt, and it's going to suck. Like it is. It might be for 5 years, might be for 10 years, might be for longer. But if you don't start now, when are you going to? And that's the hard part is people like, well, it'd be great to have a whole lot of money. And I had somebody I interviewed for my podcast. She's actually a client, but she, at her late 30s, just shy of 40, she said this publicly, so I can share it, has $1 million. And I asked her, like, how in the world, the single person living in the US, because keep in mind, it costs you somewhere between $400,000 and $1 million extra across your life to be single. You can't share housing. You can't, like, how did you do this? And her answer was, I got decent jobs. I got on a budget. I saved. I grinded out. Like, her family gave her nothing. She actually has to support them. Like, it's possible. But when you're drowning in debt and you're having all this trouble, it looks just insurmountable.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part is you got to find those other people like that have done it and follow it.
Yeah. Um, okay, so we've had a couple other questions come in. So we have this question: do you think childless couples need to save much more for aging versus parents, given more dependency on nursing or home care needs versus moving in with kids and support from kids? Or do you find that your clients don't differ that much in retirement fundings from parents?
Yeah. So let's boil this down. This question is always who's going to take care when you're older?
Yeah.
Like, that's the big one. And here's the stat. It costs about $115,000 a year for a skilled nursing facility. On average, men will spend 2.2 years in care, women 3.7. It's stupidly expensive. It just is. If you look at adults over 55, the census did a study on this. They found that in childless adults over 55, 2.5% got any financial support from their family. So that's like nothing. They also looked at parents over 55. They found that 1.5% got any financial support from their family. So actually, parents got less financial support than childless people. I can't make understanding of that. Like, it's statistically not a big difference. But we need to have a plan. My goal for my clients is to have a plan for your long-term care by your mid-40s. Now, that doesn't mean if you hit 50, you've run out of time. But what it means is you need to have a plan for either long-term care insurance, money set aside, or you're going to rely on Medicaid. Because remember, Medicare does not cover long-term care. I just threw an article in the chat that actually has pricing and some things around long-term care. You need to have a solution. You need to be able to cover it. For couples, what I always worry about is the first person that goes into care can spend all the rest of the money that the other person needs to live on for the rest of their life. And especially if we got an age gap relationship, like you could be really I mean, my wife and I have 7 years difference. If I take all the money for my long-term care, she can have a decade or more broke.
Yeah.
And this is where you have to have a plan. And the truth is, parents need it too. We're just more aware of it.
Yeah. Okay, no, we just have a couple minutes left. We had one more question come in. How do you find a professional fiduciary if in one of the two states, if you are in one of the two states you mentioned? Is it an
Yep.
upfront charge or do they take payment from a percentage of your assets?
So in California or Arizona, you literally can Google professional fiduciary. That's the key term. And there's a whole like society of them and the rules and all that. They usually charge on an hourly basis or on a retainer. That's what you want. The percentage of assets doesn't work for us because if you're trying to wind down your wealth or not passing money to the next generation, you'll actually run out of money to pay for that. That's a problem. It was one of those we had to solve with the Childfree Trust, and we've actually decided that the people that join us, we will take care of them even if they run out of money. That doesn't mean we're going to pay their medical bills, but we will be their power of attorney. We'll make decisions for them. The professional fiduciaries will only do whatever you pay for hours wise, things. In general, for people without kids, I try to stay away from people that are charging a percentage of your assets because there's a conflict of interest there. You want to wind down your wealth and give it away and use it. They want it to constantly go up.
Mm-hmm.
And they may be pushing you in an area where that advice does not fit you. You want to be looking for flat fee fiduciaries. You want to be looking for hourly or subscription based annual fees, things like that, where you're paying for it. I will say, since we're here, I will give a shameless plug. So we offer something we call a child-free checkup, which is we take a look at your finances top to bottom with a lens of people who don't have kids. And kind of go, here's where your warning areas are. Like, it's kind of like when you take your car for an oil change, and like your tires need work and this needs work. Like, we're outlining that. We charge $250 for it. So there's a charge, but it's to get a professional to give you kind of like, here's my map. Here's what I'm worried about. Here's what I need to, here's what I don't see. What are my unknowns? And we're doing that intentionally because we want people to see it through the other lens.
Yeah.
And it's also part of the reason why we charge hourly, flat fee, all that instead, because we need to reflect our clients. If you can't find a professional fiduciary in your state, you can try your local attorney. I've had some people get a little bit of luck on that, but it's so hit or miss. I can't even make a recommendation. There's like one attorney in Georgia that'll do it, like that I know of. Like, that's the problem.
That's wild. Okay. Well, thank goodness you're working through these issues for us and are going to keep us updated and come up with solutions. So I put the link to your book again in the chat. It is available for pre-order, and I think it comes out on the 31st. Is that right, of this month?
It does. Yep.
So if you want to check that out, and again, if you let's see, will the links be included in the replay? I will try to remember to add them in the replay. And yes, so Dr. J, what else did I miss? If people pre-order your book, they will be enrolled for the giveaway to do a session with you.
Yep, they got to check up with me is what we're giving away, and also we're doing secret Q&As for the people that just pre-order the book. So,
okay, cool. Well, Dr. J, it's always so great to talk with you, and I don't know, maybe we should be doing these like quarterly or something, because I know people always have questions, and it's so good to be able to pick your brain and get some of our questions answered. I tend to be avoidant with this stuff because it just all scares me and it feels overwhelming, but I really have appreciated the opportunity I've had to work with you over the last couple of years to help me kind of, like you said, that checkup to try to figure out what are the areas that I need to focus on and where can I start, instead of just getting overwhelmed by like, oh gosh, I got to do everything. So I really appreciate you and your approach to all of this, and that you're out here doing this work. So, thank you so much for looking out for us, and for being here tonight too. It's always great to talk with you.
I always love you. Love your community. I will say I'm happy to come back anytime. But the next time I come back, I'm going to ask you, did you get your will, your estate paperwork done?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So that means you either won't
I'm
be coming back
publicly calling you out a
you
little
need to
bit.
do it.
Like, she's like, I'm never going to invite you back because I didn't do my paperwork. Like that's why I give you like free, like you might have to pay to like get a notary like $20 or whatever, but like
I know it's not the money. It is not the money that's stopping me. It's the having to figure out what the heck I'm supposed to put in there. So
and
uh
that's the whole point. Like
I know
no,
it's a good reminder for me, and yeah, I'll you can bug me about it next time, and we'll
you're
see
all
how
missing
we
that. I've
go
been
for it.
bugging Katie about this for at least a year.
I know, I know, I know, I know. I am the ultimate procrastinator, so all right. Well, thank you so much, and thanks to everybody who joined. I hope that you got something from this, and definitely check out Jay's book. It's super helpful. It really does function as a guide, where it's like every chapter is a different topic, and it does kind of just walk you through some of the bigger decisions that you might need to make and how to plan for different things, and gives you some good introductory and sometimes more than introductory info on these different topics, and is easy to follow along. There's tons of like resources and guidance along the way, so you can actually take steps after each chapter. So it's very well laid out. Definitely check it out if you're looking to get started with this, or if you're in the intermediary. And then if you're in the advanced, man, just book a call with Dr. J and he'll help you figure out where to go next. But yeah, thank you so much for you for being here, Jay, and everyone who joined.